In an era of unprecedented events, a plethora of alternatives have been utilized and mobilized as new implementations to carry out what has always considered to be the normality of life. Nonetheless, despite taking a change of roots in the routines of norms, some things never change, resulting in its being considered an event of norm. In which case, I refer to what is widely recognized to be the world's #1 continuous threat. The crisis of climate change has always been at the helm of focus of governments around the world, leading to a variety of non-governmental organizations or NGOs to take actions in battling such a threat. One of which is the United Nations, whom have been at the center of one of the biggest global movements in tackling the crisis of climate change by sustaining its #1 factor. Hello and a good day to all the beloved viewers of the Malaysia Exchange Dialogue series. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, the Malaysia Exchange Dialogue series is a monthly dialogue series developed by the Design for Change, which is led by young children on topics related to child rights, the environment, and other issues the youth of the world feel deeply about. I'm your host, Myxchange Ayub, joined today by our special guest for this month's episode, Mr. Douglas Ragan. I reach out a warm welcome to all to tuning in for the 11th episode of the series. The theme for this month's episode will be in conjunction with the United Nations United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, number 11, cities and communities. Now, before I continue babbling on, I must express what a pleasure it is for me and how grateful the DFC community is for you to take the time to join us for this month's Malaysia Exchange Dialogue series, Mr. Ragan. How are you?
Good. I'm doing well. Thank you. And happy World Cities Day.
Happy World Cities Day to you too, Mr. Ragan. Now, you are currently in Vancouver, Canada. Am I right?
Yes.
But you have experience living in Nairobi, Kenya, which is the base or headquarters for the United Nations Habitat. Am I right?
Yes. UN Habitat is headquartered in Nairobi.
I see. Personally, I've never been abroad of the borders of my country. So please tell us, what is it like being? What is it like being in Nairobi?
Okay. Do you want me to continue? Yes. So, yeah, well, I mean, welcome. Thank you so much for inviting me again. Happy World Cities Day, October 31st. This is the time that we celebrate cities all over the world, the time that we really look at how cities are critical to sustainability, to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, the New Urban Agenda. So this is a really important time for us at UN Habitat. As you mentioned, UN Habitat is headquartered in in Nairobi, Kenya. There's 2 UN agencies headquartered in the global south, as we call it. That would be UNEP, our sister agency, and UN Habitat. It's a beautiful place. I definitely invite you to come to Kenya. It's got amazing people, amazing scenery. I mean, it's got everything here. So yes, it is quite beautiful. But currently, like you say, I'm traveling. I'm on mission. I was just visiting youth groups in Colombia and Ecuador, and previous to that in Senegal and Ghana. So I'm kind of doing a around the world tour in a way to look at a project we're calling Youth 2030, which is funded by the Botner Foundation Botner, which is a foundation based out of Geneva. And we're looking at how young people can be better engaged in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and localizing them. So yeah, it's a great time.
Sounds wonderful. Nairobi does sound like a very nice place, and I'm pretty sure everybody watching must envy you being able to travel around the world in these difficult circumstances, you know. But for the audience information, Mr. Douglas Ragan is the unit leader acting as the director for the Youth and Livelihoods United Nations Habitat. The programs focus on urban youth development, including youth employment, governance, and participation. Mr. Ragan's employment history in the UN Habitat stands off being the chief of the Youth and Livelihoods 2011 to 2014, consultant for the civil society and youth from 2006 to 2010, the Environmental Youth Alliance senior manager from 1992 to 2007, the City of Vancouver consultant for the Olympic Youth Legacy in 2005, and participated in Development Society International Programs coordinator in 1988 to 1989. Even more about Mr. Douglas Ragan, he has also coordinated multi-year programs such as the Growing Up in Cities program based in Canada from 2003 to 2005. He was also involved in Youth Action Effecting Change from 2002 to 2004 and the Youth Community Asset Mapping Program from 2002 and 2004. Quite a mouthful for me to say all that, but all that information.
That goes a long way back. That dates me a long way. That's a pretty extensive deep dive into my resume. But yes, thank you. It's been a wonderful profession. I enjoy working with young people.
Yes. Clearly. I did spend quite the time looking you up, and for a second I found this guy. His name was Douglas Ragan, who's had some history in bank management. So I almost researched the wrong Douglas Ragan for a second. But thankfully we have the right Mr. Douglas Ragan, rightfully so. But
there's a few of us around. There's one, I think, one that owns a kayak company too, which isn't a bad thing. I might want to try that someday. But yes, no, I don't run banking or kayaking. So.
Maybe in another life, right? But based on all of the information, you did mention that you do enjoy working with young people and helping them out. So it brings me to my first actual question. What inspires you, or is the driving factor for you in aiding future development of the youth, especially in terms of their livelihoods around the world? Mr. Ragan, please.
Well, I mean, what I find is what I love working with young men and young women is just their passion for the future. I mean, I find it anywhere I go, whether it be when I worked in Canada for many years, when I am now here working in Nairobi, working in big cities, informal settlements. I mean, what they really inspires me is their resilience, their vision, their drive for a better future. And that's kind of where I think UN Habitat and the youth program that we run really focuses on, is really trying to not to give a hand out, but a hand up, working to increase the capacity of young people to do what they do better. It's not necessarily, oftentimes people feel that young people are kind of a tabula rasa. They're just a blank slate, and we have to go and we have to fill in that slate, and we have to write their lives and their stories, where oftentimes they are actual leaders. I mean, they lead, and especially when we're looking at some parts of the developing world, it's like, again, where I work in Kenya and Sub-Saharan Africa. I mean, 70% of the population is under the age of 30. I'm not sure exactly the statistics in Malaysia and Asia, but it also is quite young. So we have to, with those demographics, you have to engage young people. You can't just leave them behind. They can't be aspirational leaders. They are leaders of today and not only tomorrow. And so we really work on that, and that's kind of our philosophy.
I see. That is very interesting. Very interesting. Before we continue, ladies and gentlemen, to the next question, I like the audience watching at home to get a grasp of what is SDG number 11. To combat a plenty of crises relating to environmental issues caused by masses of infrastructure and metropolitans, such as cities, the United Nations developed the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, one of which is the theme for this month's Malaysia Exchange Dialogue series, episode 11. The Sustainable Development Goal number 11 primarily focuses on making cities and human settlements safe, inclusive, and resilient, and of course, sustainable. So, Mr. Ragan, I must ask, what can us children do with limited power and influence to play our part in achieving SDG 11?
Well, I mean, I think there's two things. One, it's not just children we're talking about. We're talking children and young people. So we're talking a whole range, and everybody defines young people as differently. Some define them 15 to 24, some younger, some older. But I think, I mean, society is made up of many different demographics: women, men, youth, seniors, and all of them play a role. I mean, I don't think the idea is not to leave any one of them behind, because they each bring something of value to the table. They each bring their perspectives, and their perspectives are critical. Young people sometimes, oftentimes are just new to the system. They have more, they're creative because they're looking, they're looking at the world with new eyes, as to say. They have passion for where they want to go. They have ideas about how cities should be planned. They have ideas about how to solve the issues such as climate change and young people. We only have to look. The other thing that we can talk about today is that this will be in some places of the world now, and very soon it'll be the first day of COP, the climate change, the huge climate change conference that's happening in Edinburgh, Scotland, where the world is coming together. Many of the world leaders are coming together to discuss what we can do. And it's very clear that young people are taking on a key role in that area. They are advocating for the need for climate change because they see it as something that is critical to their future. So again, we see time and time again that young people take on this role. And I think it's UN Habitat's goal to both increase the capacity of those young people to do that, but also sometimes just to recognize they're doing it. Sometimes we kind of gloss it over and say, oh, they're just young people, they're not really capable of whatever, but that's not really what's happens. I think you see, as this radio show is great, or this show, the YouTube show is great, we see that young people are discussing the issues, and they're looking forward to how they're going to build a sustainable future because they have the most future ahead of them. I have much less of a future ahead of me. I'm getting a bit old. So, I only have, maybe 30, 40, maybe, let's see, hopefully a lot of years, but much less than you. And I think it's important that you're involved because you see that much longer future, and you have great ideas. So I think let's hear them and let's make sure they're listened to.
Yes, that is very valid. It is what you said actually really does line up nicely for my next question, because my next question is: the children of the world today will be the dwellers of the future world. And as you say, we obviously have that. Some of us have that leadership quality in us. So it is nice to know that one day we will be able to express that. And SDG 11 focuses on what kind of world the future generation will be living in. Thus, we, as the children now, must play our parts. Mr. Ragan, how exactly do we get that message to everybody of the youth around the world? A group that seems so tolerant to the whole idea. How do we get that message across?
Well, one of the major partners, one of the unique parts of UN Habitat is that many United Nations organizations, and there's many of them, somewhat 30 plus different organizations, UNICEF, UNDP, all these different UN organizations, many of them, most focus on national governments. And the national governments are critical and important. UN Habitat, though, also focuses on local government. And our experience is that young people oftentimes, sometimes unknowingly, are very involved with local government because they want to impact their local park. They want to, they either want to make it better, they want a new park, they want to make, you see many young people doing many different projects, and they engage directly with local government. And that's what we think is important, is to recognize that young people's engagement with local government, and then further on from that, engagement with national government, and then engaged internationally with UN and such, they're all critical and important. So, I mentioned this Youth 2030 project, of which we're doing with this Foundation Botner. And that's the focus of that, is that engaging young people are trying to lessen the distance and increase the sharing between young people and local government, between mayors and such. As you know, our executive director is a mayor from Malaysia. So, that also shows you that mayors are really critical. If a mayor can be the executive director of a UN agency, that says something. That says, well, okay, what does she know? And we know, we have huge respect for our executive director, who has huge knowledge in what makes local government work. And so that's kind of what one of our big messages is, that we must work with national governments, we must work internationally, but we also need to make sure that we recognize the role of local government and all the different players, actors in sustainable development, young people, youth being one of them, women being another, private sector, must also work with local government too. Because one thing we all know, oftentimes, sometimes, for example, nonprofits or NGOs, they sometimes stay around a long time, sometimes a short time. Some of them are amazing and do some really amazing work. But one of the things we do know is there will always be local government. There will never be a time when there is not local government. So we need to make sure that we engage with them. We may need to make sure that they are part of our plans because they are critical to sustainability. They're critical to sustainable urbanization.
I see, yes, getting the opinions of people on the field. That is very true. Well, now shifting over to SDG 11, the issue is, Mr. Ragan, that 3.5 billion of the world's population currently live in cities. By 2050, it is estimated that 6 out of 10 of the world's population will be city dwellers. That's about 6 billion people. Cities across the world already consume 60 to 70% of the world's resources and contribute to over 80% of the world's emission, making it one of the largest carbon footprints in the world. Mr. Ragan, to your extent of knowledge, what exactly is the UN's vision to continue developing cities in a sustained manner and not bombard the world's resources while still ensuring that children possess the proper means to have a good childhood to be the base and foundation of a bright future in adulthood?
Well, we definitely can say that cities do consume a lot. And cities do produce pollution and they produce greenhouse gases. There is no doubt. But also, cities are a place of creativity. Cities are a place of economy. You know, there's no country in the world that is very successful that doesn't have successful cities. I can't give you the exact statistic about how much GDP cities provide to the globally, but it's quite substantive. So I think what we have to do is to recognize the challenges cities face, especially in terms of climate change, but then look at how we can make things sustainable, how we can create sustainable growth, the growth that doesn't destroy our environment, growth that doesn't create or produce greenhouse gases and affect climate change. And that's possible. We have seen that. And cities are a great engine of change. I mean, you see, actually, what we've seen with some of the cities of the world is they're more progressive than many national governments. I mean, a lot of cities are like, they're frontline. I mean, people know who they are. And so a lot of cities have taken this lead role in climate action and climate change. So I 100% agree that we should recognize the challenges cities face and the challenges cities bring to a global environment and a global economy and such, but we also have to recognize the huge benefits they bring and make sure that we assure that the people who live in the city have sustainable livelihoods, equitable livelihoods, as well as that those cities are able to support economies at a national level and international level.
All right, I understand. Yes, that is true. Cities are definitely one of the main powerhouses for economically for all countries. So we can't just get rid of cities and expect the global emission to deteriorate immediately, right?
Yeah.
Nonetheless, throughout the whole conversation, you've always mentioned that children across the world always have their visions and want them to be implemented in the world. So this brings up to my final question for you, Mr. Ragan. One of the main goals of the DFC is to promote the fact that even children have the power to apply change in the big world. The Design for Change community believes that to see change, one needs to be change. Mr. Ragan, do we, the youth of the world, have proper platforms influential enough to express our views and thoughts on how we want to be living, rather than it being seen, still rightfully so, through the eyes of adults such as you? Does the UN supply such platforms for the children's voices of each nation to be heard rather than be assumed?
I think the UN and national governments and governments globally are definitely trying to make sure that young people are heard. And especially in the climate change movement, we definitely see that you either agree to hear them or they'll make you hear them. They are quite loud. But I still definitely think that there's room for improvement. We have an amazing envoy on youth to the Secretary General. She works directly with the Secretary General, and she's done some amazing work in making sure that young people are heard at the UN. We also have what we call the ECOSOC Youth Forum that comes up every February, March, I think, in New York. That's another platform. We have many projects. Like I said, this Youth 2030 project will have a platform in which we have a community of practice, we're calling it, in which young people can engage and be heard and make decisions and such. So I think we have come some way, and I think we've come some way fairly well in the last 7, 8, 9 years. But we still, I mean, the envoy on youth position, the Secretary General, was created, I think, in 2015. So we're 6, 7 years into that now. But I still think there's room for improvement, absolutely. And I still think that we need. I mean, we've had a lot of projects that we looked. We had a project called Youth 21, which we did with the government of Norway, UN Habitat, UNDP, which we called for the creation of like something similar to the permanent forum for Indigenous peoples, like a permanent forum for youth. We've called for many things. So, and there's a new vision that the Secretary General has put out that is looking like it's going to formalize the youth platform. The government of Turkey has promoted and really pushed wanting to engage young people and setting up a larger center that might engage young people. So there's many different projects on the go. I still think we have a ways to go, and we can't just sit on our laurels. But I mean, having been involved in the youth movement or working with young people for many, many years, a couple decades at least, I have seen improvement. I have seen things moving forward, and that makes me hopeful. And it makes me hopeful that young people will have more and more ability to engage, more and more ability to make and to be involved in decisions that impact them, such as the Convention on the Rights of the Child gives them that mandate. And yeah, so I think we are moving in the right direction. But just last thing I'd like to say is that so we have these dual crises, if you want to look at it. We have climate change, which we mentioned, and then we have the pandemic. And the pandemic has harmed young people substantively. I mean, we have the health side of it, which has harmed a lot of seniors and as the most vulnerable populations, and many people who are have marginalized health or compromising health conditions. But young people, especially in around livelihoods and education, UNICEF says there's almost 400 million young people that have not gone back to school. I mean, this is brutal. I mean, this is meanings that a lot of young people, their pathway to careers and happy livelihoods has been stopped, and we have to address that. We cannot let that stand. I mean, there has been some predictions that the pandemic might knock the sustainable development goals back maybe 5 or 10 years. Let's hope that doesn't happen, but we really need to make sure that young people are not left behind. I mean, what we say with the SDGs, which I think is really good, is leave no one behind. And there's no more critical time with us hopefully coming out of the pandemic to say that, and to make sure that young people are able to follow their education, able to get sustainable livelihoods and make families and do all those wonderful things that young people dream to do.
That is very true. Well, nonetheless, Mr. Ragan, I must express it has been an absolute honor for me personally to be given this opportunity and interact with a hero for many people around my age, like you. Genuinely, I've looked into you quite a lot, and you've done plenty to help the world in the youth of the world in bringing up a bright future for all of them. Genuinely, I think I represent all those people, and to give you a very warm thank you, Mr. Ragan.
Well, and I accept that warm thank you, and I reflect it back because it's an honor to be here. It's great what you're doing. I think this platform is wonderful. And I think it's the young people that, obviously it's very common to say, oh, young people are our future, but I really think they're also the hope for today. And I really hope that we as UN Habitat can continue to work with young people in Malaysia and Asia and globally to make that happen.
Well, we here at the DFC community really appreciate you seeing our projects in that way. Nonetheless, that brings us to the end for this month's Malaysia Exchange Dialogue series. I sincerely thank the audience for tuning in, and I really give another thank you to Mr. Douglas Ragan for being able to make the time to join us for today. Well, it should be all from us. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Ciao, ciao.